Welcome. So I'm Annemarie Tierney. I am a consultant at the Digital Chamber. I run the Token Alliance Working Group, and with me today, why thank you, sir. Oh, Kenny, thank you. With me today are our Token Alliance co-chairs, Lilya Tessler and Teresa Goody Guillen, and Morrison Warren from Chapman & Cutler, who has been a huge help to us on a number of issues around ETFs and investment company issues. So we're going to talk today about something I didn't know we would be talking about 2 months ago, which is wins, non-stock wins, on priorities that we published in December for things we thought the SEC needed to be addressing to rebuild a culture of trust with our digital asset industry. If you all haven't seen it, they're published on our website. They're called SEC 2025 Policy Priorities. We went very, very deep, right? Bottom up, from things the staff has been publishing, things that the staff has been doing, things the staff has been blocking. And it's not just under Gensler, it was before Gensler. And really kind of laid out a roadmap for the SEC from day one. We've only gotten to day 90, we're at day 60. I think we have to kind of refresh and kind of think like what's next. But it's on our website, and as things get done or are in motion, we turn things green. And I didn't bring it with me, I was gonna hold it up, and it's very green. It's making me really happy. So we're gonna kick off, Lily's gonna kick off and talk about kind of what we've seen happen that we think are major wins, what are been surprising wins, and what are sort of still pending. And I'm gonna ask Teresa absolutely weigh in, and Morrison as well. So you want to kick it off?
Great, yes, thank you, Anne-Marie, and excited to talk about all of the wins and all the hard work that the Chamber has been doing in this area. So we saw some of the first wins the first week of the new administration. With January 21st coming around, we saw the SEC create a crypto task force that's going to be focused on the issues that many of which were outlined in our priorities. And even before the Digital Chamber went in to meet with the crypto task force, we saw some of those early wins. The first was SAB 121 being rescinded on January 23rd with under SAB 122, effectively resetting the slate for a lot of public companies and regulated intermediaries that were restrained under that SAB 121. Restrictions on custody and disclosures and so forth, and accounting treatment. So that was a huge win for the Digital Chamber and the industry generally.
And that was a day one priority for us. And if everybody in the room might remember, that was a piece of guidance that the SEC put out that the Congress, bipartisan support to rescind that, and that President Biden vetoed, which was a shame. But yeah, so that was like a day two.
Yeah.
Huge win for the industry.
Definitely. And then over the last several months, we saw a trickle of wins under the category of enforcement actions that are aligned in our priorities. And the enforcement actions and the wins we've seen really stem across the industry. First, we saw the SEC announce they were renaming and reorganizing the Crypto Asset and Cyber Unit to be the Cyber and Emerging Technology Unit, and really refocusing their priorities on retail investor harm type cases and fraud related cases, as opposed to failure to register cases, which is what we've seen over the years in areas where there has not been any proactive guidance in the SEC on a lot of these topics. In parallel to that, and working really hard, the SEC and various industry participants worked with them to see, we saw in the public, and a lot of this has been already announced, number of intermediary cases that have been dropped that were unregistered broker-dealer, unregistered exchange-related cases. We also saw certain issuer cases, as recently as this morning, announcing that they may be in settlement discussions for failure to register matters.
Let's name these, because I'm going to. I know you don't
go
want to
ahead.
get into enforcement matters. I'm going to.
Okay.
We've done, sorry, I'm pretty proud about this. We've done amicus briefs on a lot of these matters. And Lily's done amicus briefs. Steve Gaddy's done amicus brief. Others in this room have worked on these matters. We did an amicus brief in the Ripple matter that Lily worked on, in the context of that the Howey test has never been extended to secondary trading of an asset. SEC dropped its appeal on that matter, or it's been announced that it's been dropped. The SEC formally voted to drop its case against Coinbase. We did an amicus on that. They formally dropped their case against Kraken. We had done an amicus for that. They've stayed their case against Binance. We did an amicus for that. That's the one that Clifford Chance helped us with. And then you were talking about investigations, and Teresa, I want you to join in with me on this. Teresa and I both worked at the SEC. They have stayed investigations, formally terminated investigations, and I'm going to lose count, so if others in the room want to add in. So far, Gemini, Uniswap, Robinhood Crypto, God, who else? There's so many of them now. Who else? Who else? Everybody in the room? Cumberland, is that done? Okay, so all of these investigations that were formally started, which means, you want to weigh in on this one? Like, what does it mean to have an investigation open against you?
Yeah, it's quite a long process, and it starts with MUI, like a matter under investigation, and then once you see that, once the staff thinks that they have enough, that there's a good chance that the securities laws were violated, then you have to go and get a formal order, and the commission signs it, and all the commissioners vote on this to start an actual investigation, and this is something that was recently pulled back. So they had delegated the formal order authority to the Director of Enforcement. So the Director of Enforcement has been able to, at different times, issue the formal order, that's what lets them have the subpoena power. So before that, everything is voluntary. And it is, quite a process, and you have to make a certain showing.
We have 30 minutes. Yeah. So we're not stopping in 10 minutes, so we'll be back in 20. Thank you.
And which is another big deal, that the commission actually pulled back that delegated authority. So to open anything now, a new investigation, you have to go through the commission. But they don't just close investigations generally. I mean, you have to kind of go through a process and, show, they've got certain duties that they have to comply with to be able to close an investigation. There is the chairman, the acting chairman now, UEDA, has enforcement discretion, which a lot of people don't understand how broad that is. But the chairman can basically choose which cases he's going to bring and which cases he's not. And it doesn't mean that it's not a violation of the law. It means that this is not a priority of his. He's going to exercise his discretion. And so we haven't seen something like this where after the investigation is started, as opposed to before cases start being brought, that a chairman exercises such a broad degree of enforcement authority. So I think it really speaks volumes to just the about face that the commission is doing right now.
And a lot of these matters hang over companies sometimes forever, right? It's not always the case that an investigation is formally terminated.
Oh no, sometimes it'll be 10 years. I'll have a client and they've had an open investigation for 10 years, and you don't want to go ask anything because you don't want to poke the bear, right?
Yeah.
Just let it continue to sit and die. But yeah, oftentimes you don't get closing letters.
Yeah. So anyway.
I do a lot, just so you know.
Yeah. So anyway, I want to call that out. Like, I know you guys don't want to get into enforcement, but I'm happy to get into enforcement. So yeah.
I was going to say, moving on, a couple other wins I want to make sure we mention is on the rulemaking and just guidance front. And there's a lot of different areas in our priorities that we outlined of areas that the SEC needs to give guidance, and the industry's been waiting on for a while, whether it's guidance in the form of no action relief or commission statements or division statements. All of that, I think, is on the table. And what we saw since the start of this administration is a few of those early wins. First, we saw Commissioner Peirce's statement on there must be some way out of here, outlining a list of questions, as well as kind of areas of thinking that they've already done in some of these topics that aligned with our priorities. But more recently, we saw some of the early guidance in smaller areas that also tackle the priorities. And the first is the meme coin guidance on February 27th that Division of Corporation Finance offered as to why meme coins are not securities under the federal securities laws. We just saw last week the proof of work guidance of why certain mining activities, which is technology function, is not a securities transaction. I think that builds on the broader question in our priorities, which is if certain technology functions underpinning the blockchain, different types of blockchains, different types of consensus mechanisms are securities. So I think there are probably more answers that will need to come on a lot of other technology functions, but it's definitely an early win to see the SEC really thinking about the technology the way that they should be, in proof of work, and hopefully more other functions and guidance to come from that.
I think we've also seen, right, so far, the SEC had proposed an expansion of the exchange definition that would have covered DeFi platforms. They've pulled that, right? That's been terminated. And I think Commissioner Ueda has also asked the staff to consider whether or not to drop, it was on the broker. What was the other one he asked about, Teresa? It was, anybody else remember? He just asked the staff last week or the week before to consider whether or not they should also reconsider custody. Thank you. Yeah, the custody proposal. That was a big one. That was a big priority for us. Thank you. That was a big one. So they're really looking at, and these are all things on our priorities. I'm sure the SEC is sitting around with our priorities in front of them saying, what's next? Because we gave them the roadmap. But no, there's a lot of people at the SEC who are working very, very hard in a really tough environment. I saw the article the other day that 12% of the staff has taken the package to leave. That's a huge hit on a small agency. And these are good people who work really hard. So it's a tough environment.
And it's kind of hard to realize, too, that how fast they're working and how much work goes into everything they're doing. Like, this is warp speed, right, for the commission. And, recognizing that, and also there's only so much you can do when your chairman is not yet confirmed in there. And so, being really thoughtful about not getting too far ahead where they might do something that impedes the incoming chairman and his prerogative, but also moving forward and getting some clarity and order in the markets. It's a very careful balance, and they are going very fast.
Yeah. And the good news is Paul's hearings tomorrow, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we're excited for that. Anything else you want to cover, Lily, on our wins so far of our increasingly green sheet?
I think I've covered a few different divisions. One of it, I have not covered anything on the trading and market side, and I think that's an area where a number of market participants are looking for guidance on how broker-dealers can facilitate digital asset securities transactions. But that is an area that's covered in detail in Commissioner Peirce's request for input, and so that's where we're seeing kind of them thinking about how to tackle broker-dealer regulations in the context of blockchain digital asset securities. So I would say that is kind of a win in that they are asking the industry, and they're bringing in folks that's submitting comments and having meetings on those topics to figure out how they can give more guidance and facilitate orderly markets on the digital asset securities front.
Okay, well, let's talk about another division that we haven't focused on, Morrison. Let's talk about investment management. So some of the things, I'm going to just call out some amazing things you've done for us. So two of the things that we published that Chapman & Cutler, Morrison, and his colleague Rick Quayle have done for us are two papers. One was called Crypto Conundrum, which was a really deep dive expose into the SEC blocking approval of spot Bitcoin ETF. It's spectacular. And I think really helped move the needle, especially on the Hill, to call out the SEC's arbitrary and capricious activities around denying these products for over 10 years. The second we just published, which is called Beyond Merit, and it's on our website, and it's an investigation, same kind of concept, expose into the Division of Investment Management, denying registered investment companies the ability to invest in crypto funds in a way that they should be able to invest without limit. So we want to thank you for that. Amazing thought leadership. So why don't you walk us through kind of what's been happening Beyond Merit, a little bit more detail, and what we're seeing on the crypto ETF front, because that's another big part of our priorities, is moving more of the crypto ETFs and issues for investment management.
Sure, happy to. I'll start with a win. The fact that the Bitcoin funds had come out a little bit over a year ago was an absolute win. Since 2013, folks were trying to bring a Bitcoin fund. There were so many attempts to approach the SEC to have that happen. The Digital Chamber was instrumental in aggregating thought as it related to this topic, and we were really the scribes associated with pulling together the views of the members, interviewing a ton of people in the industry to talk about what's been done, the fact that we're ready for a Bitcoin fund. Ultimately, all that worked, and we ended up in January of last year, the largest ETF launch, I'll say ETF generically, ETP launch, ETF launch ever. It started something rolling, but I'll say that the SEC was dragged there reluctantly. It really took a suit from Grayscale. It took the marketplace, it took the Hill, it took a lot of folks to get there, and it really focused on how the SEC was so skeptical of the asset class that they were slowing things down. Bitcoin came, Ether came. Surprisingly, there was momentum against that, but ultimately there was enough pressure, but that was really it. We had Bitcoin futures funds on the ETF side, which in the same process, it was no, until finally a reluctant yes. And what Beyond Merit speaks to is the SEC really doesn't have that power. Like, that is beyond their mandate. They are not merit regulators. They have a series of obligations, and they have a role, but that role isn't deciding between what's better or not, what's too risky or not. And so through, again, interviewing members of the Digital Chamber, trying to get something in front of the SEC to move the needle. I will say that things have changed so dramatically. And I'll start with, there are two separate types of fund types that we're talking about. Those that are investment companies, which I'll call ETFs, and those that are not, which are pools of non-securities, which ETPs. On the investment company side, and back in 2018, the SEC released guidance saying you really cannot bring a fund that includes crypto unless you meet all these criteria. And what has been known as the Dahlia Blast letter was something that effectively told people not to come and try to bring assets through. And if you did, you had to speak to them separately and off the schedule, because normally if you have an effective registration statement, under rule, you can go effective in 75 days. So they were saying that time frame was too tight, there were too many issues to think about. We would have conversations with the staff and we would hear no. You just can't go. And then no, eventually, at some point, might need to yes, but it was arbitrary in a sense. Not that I have total respect for the staff, not that they weren't doing their job in a sense, they were doing what their mandate was. But what you ended up circumstances where who should actually be the party who comes out first with a product was altered. The point at which people got access to products were altered, and Beyond Merit was calling that out. I will say that where we are now is that on the 40 Act side, anything that we file that arguably includes assets that are sufficiently deemed securities or enough securities to have an investment company, we're able to file. There are questions of liquidity, there's questions of disclosure, but there aren't questions as to whether we can actually move forward, which is fantastic. And so I imagine you may have seen that there's a Solana futures fund that a couple of them just went effective, was it last week, which would have never happened. And on the 33 Act side, there is this desire to solve problems. The Crypto Task Force is fantastic. They're inquiring specific questions as to solve problems or issues, staking in funds, in-kind transfers, which is important, how to cope with custody, because custody on the 40 Act side is restricted and mandated, and so therefore no spot crypto assets are included within 40 Act funds at this point. So moving on those fronts, we really do need help more easily deciding what a security is, because it makes a difference as to what and are there assets that are digital assets that need to be registered, and how? Those are important questions. But I think they're trying to get to answers, and I think the chamber is, and the members of the chambers are really working hard to try to help the SEC solve problems, and they want to solve problems. So this is just an absolute brand new day.
Well, I want to over-under on the Penguin ETF approval. So Penguin NFT approval, that's clearly something everybody wants to invest in. And I know we're starting work streams next week for everybody who's a member. I've been bullying all my friends to join our work streams. Morrison's going to head up the one on ETFs and help us get some clarity there on moving forward on a lot of these issues. So please join the work streams to answer Hester Purse's questions. And I want to end with Teresa, who had, I think, the great joy of participating in the first roundtable the SEC held last week with a very eclectic group of participants. So, Teresa, can you share a little bit of the roundtable with us and anything else you're hearing that would be of interest to the group?
Yeah, I was so pleased to be part of that roundtable, and this is something that the commission used to do a long time ago and hasn't done for a while, and really getting a lot of different people who are working in the space and have a good understanding of the technology to come around and talk about it. It was moderated by a former SEC Commissioner, Troy Paredes, who did a fantastic job of really trying to drill down to, like, what is a security? Which of these are securities and which aren't, and why? And a lot of the conversations kind of start in the middle of that conversation, and he brought it back to the beginning, and in doing that you could see how people who have been in this space for a really long time still have taxonomy issues among them. And so it was, some people agreed more than they thought because they were using different words. Other people realized that they actually disagreed with one another because they were using the same word to mean different things. And so it was very informative and really helped, I think, get people thinking about all the different ways that we can think about this and consider this and approach this, into really trying to determine, which of these are securities, because they're all different. There's lots of different rights and interests and benefits and risks, and there's, so different ways that people think about it. And it was, so well received, and I got a lot of feedback afterwards that people are actually starting to really think much deeper and realizing we need to pull back and start a little bit at the beginning. So that was huge. And I think that a lot of this has also gone through, not necessarily because of the roundtable, I'm sure, but these conversations are starting to happen more, including on the Hill. And so we're seeing, like with Fit 21, which the Chamber has been working on to try and give some proposed improvements to. And the Hill is now doing a lot more. They're taking a step back, and they're gonna, really open it up to change quite a bit on the House side and the Senate side. So they are still pushing for that, that President Trump wants a bill before the August recess, and they're pushing for it. So, if you want to put feedback in and things like that, then, now is really the time, because I think they're hoping to get out a discussion draft in June. So it's going to be this interactive, and discussion draft. They really want feedback. They really want to get it right. They really want to hear from industry. And they're really going to make changes. So it's a little bit different than what we were hearing before, and very encouraging.
Yeah, so, one thing that we've been working on for a couple of months with Teresa and her team's help at Baker was, and many of you may have seen, we put out surveys, we asked for feedback from the members, we developed a set of principles, and I think the principles are great, right? So it's disclosure is necessary, investor protections are necessary, and so we started with the principles we're providing to the staff of the committees, and then to know that now there's opportunity for change, because I think a lot of our members felt like it was complicated, and the new kind of concepts of registration were complicated, and my own view, maybe coming from the SEC, was to flip something back and forth between the SEC and the CFTC was complicated. So I have 22 minutes left. 22? Okay. We need to make this simple, right? I think, as simple as possible and clear. And I don't think that we should have agency discretion to challenge a decision. And that was one of the things I thought was problematic in the original bill, that a project could make a determination, say to the CFTC, here's a determination, that the SEC could challenge that. Because that's fine under one administration, but maybe not under another. So we just needed to kind of make a clear case, establish rules, legislation, and then that would be it. So I'm glad we have a chance to provide input as a trade, and I hope everybody will participate. And I hope we have more wins. I'm hoping that by the end of 90 days, we have more green on the paper and that we get a chance to reset for 90 to 120 days. And we really need your help. So everybody who's a member, please participate in our work streams and tell us if there's other things that we didn't identify that you think are blockers at the SEC. And we're going to continue to meet with the crypto task force. We're going to continue to advocate for the members. And I really appreciate these three people and others in the room who give us so much of their time and their big brains. And thanks to all of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.